My forthcoming book, The Event of Literature, is a sort of time warp in a way, because it is actually a sort of return to pure literary theory, which these days is less popular than it was in the 80s and 90s. Literary theory as such, I think, was finally overtaken by other developments, particularly post-colonialism, postmodernism, and so on. And in the process, a number of important questions of literary theory that I think hadn't really got answered, including the old chestnut, what is literature, was in a sense put on the back burner. And so my new book, The Event of Literature, is actually a very consciously return to the days of what you might call high or pure literary theory, raising questions about narrative, about literature, about fictionality, about literary language, which in a sense, as I say, have been shelved really for too long over that intervening period. Literature as a concept, as we know it today, is of very recent historical provenance. It basically probably comes to us only from the end of the 18th century, from the Romantic period. And it comes to us with a huge, it's fraught with a huge important history. That's to say, it comes out of a situation of great social turbulence, the Industrial Revolution and so on, the political revolutions in France and America, where history was moving rapidly under people's feet, and they felt that certain things of value were being threatened, and art or literature became repositories of value that had then to be rather jealously protected from the winds of history. So the concept of literature as a sort of privileged enclave that we receive is by no means common to human history. It comes out of a very recent past. How far do questions of literary theory matter is an important point. It's hard to weigh that up, I think. How far does literature matter? It matters enormously, of course, for people who are engaged in it, but of course the vast majority of people aren't. That's one reason, I think, why there was a shift sometime in the 1980s, perhaps, from literature to culture. There was a kind of seismic shift there, because if you define culture in a broad and generous sense, then of course it's something that most people are bound up with. Indeed, I tend to say these days that if you want a definition of culture, it's what people are prepared to kill for. I don't mean for Bach and Beethoven, but I mean for identity, language, and so on. How far these things matter is difficult. Literary theory was important because it opened literature up into areas, political, psychoanalytical, which do matter clearly to anybody, I think. It was partly an attempt to give a new kind of relevance to the study of literature, make it more exciting. But I still, I would say that although culture is what people are prepared to kill for or die for, as a good old materialist, I still don't think that culture is where it's at. I mean, I don't think that culture, however important it is, goes all the way down. And therefore, culture is a bit like sexuality. It's always very hard to avoid either overestimating it or underestimating it. The Event of Literature is, I think, a book for people who remain interested in literary theory, or indeed for people who want to come to it afresh and who haven't had much training or history in it. But I hope it's also a book not just for people in literature. I mean, it begins, for example, with looking at the medieval debates between the realists and the nominalists, which are not at all about literature, but so that in the process of raising the question, what is literature, what is fiction, I hope I'm raising issues which are of more general import and which, are relevant to people who aren't actually in the area of literature at all.